Hey guys, welcome back to Reddit Stories. I didn't give my twin brother my kidney because he had an affair with my girlfriend and then outed me as bi. This was my revenge cast, fake names for obvious reasons. Me equals Ryan, brother equals Sebastian, mum equals mum, dad equals dad, sister equals Jane, best friend equals Isaac, cousin equals Kai, backstabbing cow equals girlfriend, husband equals Daniel. Ryan and my twin brother Sebastian have never ever been close. In fact, he made life hell growing up and my parents didn't help by playing favorites, getting him better stuff on our birthday, only going to see films he liked at the cinema and giving him extra money for housework despite us doing the same amount of work. He would always put me down, belittle me, bully me with his friends at school, break my stuff and then blame me, and was just a pain in general. Growing up, the only people I knew to rely on was my older sister Jane, my cousin Kai, and my best friend Isaac, who all knew what an awful person my brother was. Anyway, cut to when I was 17 and I had my first girlfriend, someone I loved very much. We didn't have intimacy cause she wanted to wait till her 18th birthday to lose her virginity. But it turns out that she was having an affair with my brother behind my back for half the time we were together and only got caught when it was revealed she was pregnant. I was crushed. She knew how much I hated my brother and she saw some of the awful things he did to me, but she still went and did that. Cheating is bad enough, but to do it with him of all people. I punched him in the face and broke his nose and made him lose a tooth, but according to my parents I'm the one in the wrong, and now we have to help this girl who is carrying my brother's child and have to help support them. My brother then said he had no intention of being a father and told my girlfriend to get an abortion. She then ran out of town and I never saw her again. Don't know if she had the baby or the mission was aborted. All I know was that she was gone and my folks were still praising my brother as the golden child. I was still the black sheep and failure as usual. Another year goes past and me and my brother still despise each other, but I had started dating again. Was a long while, but I found someone. Found a boy I liked. I am bisexual and this new guy Daniel I had met at college caught my eye. He was deaf and I studied sign language out of boredom, so we got talking and things just seemed to click. We date, fall in love, bring him to my friend Isaac's party to introduce him to friends, and all feel great. At this point, the only one who knew I was bi was Isaac, but one day walking into a cinema holding my boyfriend's hand I bump into my evil twin. He points, laughs, and says some anti-gay remarks. I tell him to go F himself and I go see a movie with my arm round my boyfriend. When I got home after dropping my boyfriend home, I knew I'd be facing something as I walked through the front door. I saw both my parents on the sofa, my mother crying about how on earth could she have given birth to someone so disgusting. Was it too much to hope she saw the light and was talking about my brother? But nope, she was talking about me and how I'm a stain on our family's name. My father gets up to yell at me and spouts anti-gay remarks and slurs. At this point, I see my brother up the staircase with a bull-eating grin on his face. He then comes down and says he's uncomfortable with sharing a room with a gay, and my folks kicked me out there and then. With what little clothes and money I had, I went to Isaac's house and his family took me in, where I stayed for 6 months, actually experiencing familial love and affection, and Isaac's mother and stepdad I consider my own parents now. Eventually, me, Daniel, and Isaac all get a 2-bedroom flat together and all is good for the time being. So cut to December last year, me and my boyfriend, now husband Daniel, are married. Isaac was my best man. My sister and cousin Kai walked me down the aisle. I have a brilliant job in graphic design, have my own house by the sea, and life has never been better. However, I got a call from my sister that my brother was in the hospital. I hadn't thought about him that much over the 9-year period since I was kicked out, but being reminded of his existence brought up a lot of painful memories for me. I was told by my sister that Sebastian wanted to see me and that it was urgent. So I went to the hospital he was in and met my sister outside the front entrance. I ask her what this is all about, but she doesn't tell me and that I need to ask my twin. So I arrive where my brother is, who has my parents at his side, and my folks actually looked happy to see me, as if what they did to me hadn't happened, and Sebastian also looked really pleased to see me. It's safe to say something was off. Eventually, I ask what was going on and why was I even there, to which my brother tells the family to leave us two alone. He looks so weak, as before he used to intimidate me so much. He told me that he was dying from kidney failure and had been for the past few years, but now he didn't have long left. I knew immediately where this was going. He then said he always regretted that we never got along, at which point I told him no. He looked confused and asked what I was on about, so I simply told him I wasn't going to donate my kidney to save him. He looked as if I had just crap in his food. He then went on about how bad the situation was and that he really was sorry for all the things we did to each other growing up. Like, excuse me, we did to each other. I told him that I just wanted a brother growing up that cared and loved me and wouldn't try and break me every day for 18 years. He then called in our mom and dad and told them that I wasn't going to give up my kidney. They then started to spout off that I owed them for my existence and that I have a duty to look after the family. I asked them where that duty was when they kicked me out of the house, or where that duty was every time my brother gave me a black eye, or their duty was to look after their grandchild when Sebastian decided he didn't want to be a father. I said for all the things he's done, from outing me to having an affair with my girlfriend and abandoning his child, that this was the universe's and my way of finally giving back what he dished out to bite him in the arse. I then turned around and walked out of the room, having that be the last time I ever saw Sebastian again. Not sure why they'd want a gay kidney anyway. I walked past my sister, who gave me a look. I gave her a look back, who then, in turn, gave me a look that said I understand. After leaving the hospital, I felt as if a great weight had been taken off my shoulders. I went home and never looked back, pleased with my decision. Now last week I get a call from my sister, called to inform me that Sebastian had died. She asked if I was okay, and I said I was, that I didn't really feel anything in all honesty. She said she understood to a degree, as Sebastian hadn't been all that kind to her over the years either. I had my husband and Isaac there to support me. Honestly, at this point, Isaac may as well be our adopted child, since he's living with us till this whole situation with the world is over. The next day I was getting calls and texts from family members I hadn't spoken to in years, telling me that is going to hell for being a bad son, being a bad brother, and for being a gay, and that me and my husband don't deserve children. Hubby and I have been looking into adoption and surrogacy. This makes me second guess my choice of not giving my brother my kidney. Even in death is making things harder for me. I did wonder if I was a bad person and if I made the wrong decision, but I knew that if I was in that position I would have been left for dead. Screw him. Other bits of information that may clear things up. 1. His renal failure was from living a hardcore lifestyle of pills and alcohol. 2. My folks and sister did get themselves tested to see if they're matches, and none of them were. 3. I disowned them of being my family years ago, apart from Jane, so when I got married I took my husband's last name and hyphened it with Isaac's last name, which his folks were very pleased about. 4. Some family, Kai's folks and my dad's brother, have actually called to see how I'm doing and say they don't judge me for what happened. Others, however, have continued with said use, whom I have now blocked. 5. If he had been a good brother throughout my life, I'd have done it without a second thought. I'd have done the same for Jane, Kai, Isaac, and my husband, but I felt he didn't deserve it. 6. It's unlikely I'll ever see my parents again, and I'll make sure my children will never meet them. My revenge on them will be being a better parent than they ever were. Read an article about a guy who donated a kidney and regretted it. OP, he gave it to some stranger. Just want to be a do-gooder and had problems afterward. You have 2 kidneys for a reason, and even though you can survive on one, it isn't like donating blood. I don't recall much of the article, but I think he has to take pills for the rest of his life and be careful about stuff. I would consider doing it for a loved one, but I'd have to look into the negatives carefully. You mentioned your brother was a pills user. If that was the case, they might not have allowed the transplant. Don't know if your case would be different than those getting one from the waiting list. They don't like wasting a kidney on someone who will just abuse it again. I think you have to prove you're off the stuff before they consider it. Now, on to the next story. Reconciliation roller coaster. My 16-year reconciliation journey has gone from bad to good to bad again, when all the usual experiences tend to show reconciliation as a process that happens once and it either succeeds or doesn't. I've heard timeframes for reconciling ranging from 6 months to 4 years, with 2 being about the average, but anything over maybe 5 years being considered in the territory of it's probably better to just die if you haven't gotten over it. This puts me well past the high water mark for reconciliation, but with an asterisk, considering roughly 14 years of those past 16 years I'd say have been okay and bearable. Back in 2005, my WW had a 6-month-long full-blown Pia with a coworker whom she thought she was going to leave me for, but then found out he wasn't the guy she had made him out to be. I was somehow able to put it behind me and work on the issues in our marriage that had contributed to her feeling like I didn't like her. Our marriage has been everything I hoped it would be, sans her infidelity, which she views as a huge mistake. The pain from her never left me and never will, but for the most part, it had faded and wasn't something I thought about very much, or when I did think about it, I didn't feel a need to bring it up with her. Last November, I experienced a strong trigger event that prompted me to want to talk about and explore her some more, and this has unexpectedly caused me to get into a pattern of rumination leading to resentment and second-guessing my decision to reconcile after all these years. In addition, it seems to have caused my brain to be rewired so that I am thinking about the again quite often, and there are more triggers now than there were before. There are these 2 conflicting parts of me that feel differently about reconciling at this time. One side is focused on the hurtful details of her. A is unable to forgive the betrayal and wants to separate to see how it would feel to date someone that hasn't ever cheated on me. She was also my first GF. This place also says F the kids and my WW's feelings because the breaking of her vows and the level of deceit was so bad that it cuts down to the spiritual level for me, and it's simply unacceptable. The other side thinks this idea would be an absolute tragedy for everyone involved, is nonsense, and scary, and thinks the opposing side of me is in a hole for changing course after so many years when there are no kids involved and years have been taken off my WWS life which could have been spent with someone that she hadn't betrayed. This is the side that wants to view our love as having the ability to withstand such a heavy blow and is graced with the power of forgiveness. My anxiety about our relationship has shot way up, and I've appeared at times over the past 4 months to be very clingy and always requiring reassurances. We also went from having intimacy once a week to a minimum of 5 times a week in a sort of revived hysterical bonding phase. This clinginess is interspersed with feelings of resentment, hurt, and bitterness which she picks up on easily despite my trying to conceal it. New questions constantly pop into my head that I didn't think to ask her before. I'm not even sure why I feel the need to continue asking questions, but I think it's because I keep hoping that the answers will lead me to the right decision, either to stay or separate. At first, I would make lists of these questions and then we would go over them almost every night with her for a few weeks, and then it lessened to maybe once or twice a week for a few months after that. After a few months of this, I could tell that I was wearing her thin and she was feeling very beat up emotionally. Basically, she feels like she can't do anything right and nothing is ever good enough for me. I feel like she lacks empathy as well as initiative, and I am left not feeling satisfied with her answers because she will often deflect or tell me why I shouldn't feel some way. In an effort to get her to be better at this, I had her read a book on infidelity and had her do several writing assignments designed to help her empathize more, among other things that she is doing to try and help me come to a place of acceptance within reconciliation, but this hasn't really helped much. We had a big blow up in early April after I had returned from a trip to our old hometown where it took place, and she broke down and asked me to just drown her in the lake by our house, screamed, cried, etc. It was a wake-up call moment that made me think to myself that I need to cool it on the questioning if I want to have a chance at keeping our marriage intact. At this point, I've stopped talking about her almost entirely because it reached the point where she now views any further questioning of her as proof that I have not forgiven her, and she is growing more and more skeptical that it's even possible for me to forgive her despite when I say I do. If I can't forgive her and get over it, she says it's not fair to either of us to remain in the marriage. I have told her I do forgive her, and now she is saying the proof of that is if I don't keep confronting her about it. Confronting her seems to mean asking any questions about it or bringing it up. I'm not sure what to think or do at this point. Maybe I'll just never feel satisfied and that's as good as it's going to get, but if that's the case I kind of feel like leaving. I feel like if I knew the whole truth, which I never will, and was there like a fly on the wall to see every last thing they did and said to each other, I'd be gone for sure. Just like I'd probably be gone if I could read her mind. So my staying just seems like I'm burying my head in the sand trying to ignore the gravity and scope of her betrayal, but staying and trying to just put it back into the recesses of my mind seems like the easiest and most comfortable way forward. It's not true that all marriages are terrible or bad, etc. OP. Some cheaters have true remorse and change. Are they perfect? No. Are they better than they were? Yes. It's to what degree can you accept the affair and move on with life and be happy? If I wasn't happy, I would not remain being married. However, if I saw things occurring again, as in infidelity, etc., I'd up and leave. The heck with the drama, it would be quick and 1, 2, 3 done. No one is ever obligated to stay unhappily married. That's the point, we all have choices. With these choices, we can make our life better for us or worse. Just take some courage to turn your life around for the better. And trust me, the grass is greener on this side. Good luck OP. Now, on to the next story. ITA, pain in the pelvis MIL, and selfish SD have got me confused. This is a bit of a complicated saga. I'm going to start with a bit of background. I, 27, female, have a large and odd family. I'm a first date baby. My parents hooked up once and 9 months later I came into the world. My mom left shortly after I was born. She had some complex mental health issues and wasn't able to be a parent. 12 months and 3 weeks after I was born, my dad had my little sister, A, and 17 months later he had my little bro. When my sister was 7, she and her best friend set our dad and her mom up and they ended up dating for 7 years. They never had children, but after they broke up, sister, B, kept living with us and is, as far as I'm concerned, is my sister. At 10, my older cousin's parents died and she came to live with us, my dad becoming her legal guardian. After a few years she started calling him dad, her request, and became sister. C. Finally, when I was 22, Leaders B got his 15-year-old girlfriend pregnant. Her parents kicked her out so she came to live with us. LB was furious and moved in with his mom, cutting off contact with the rest of us for choosing her. She is, as far as I'm concerned, my little sister, D, and I love her as much as A. And Sia got pregnant at the same time as D, and they had babies a month apart, as the son was born in Jan and D's daughter was born in Feb. C also had a son, but he was already 7 when A and D had their babies. D followed suit 2 years behind and had a little boy. A few years later, D moved in with her new BF and had a baby with him. Her son calls me Auntie just like all his cousins, and I love him as much as my other nephews and niece. When I was 24, my maternal grandmother, who I had had little to do with, died. I was her only grandchild and she left me everything. I won't go into detail, but she had been a very successful landlady and had a fair amount of properties, as well as being well off and having nice life insurance. Overnight, I went from being not well off at all to being able to retire if I wanted to. I did not. I was in my final year of undergrad and going on to postgrad education. Admittedly, I did go a little mad with money in the first few months, spoiling everyone and paying off my family's debt, etc. I also spoiled the babies a little too much. I was eventually ordered to stop by my sisters because they didn't want me turning them into spoiled brats, which is fair. I do pay for their education. None of us did well in mainstream education. I had been badly bullied for my weight and decided that Montessori school would be better for them, especially as my oldest nephew is flamboyantly gay. Even as a child, he wanted My Little Pony everything. He recently came out properly, and of course, we all pretended to be shocked for about 5 seconds. I pay for all their educational expenses, and we agreed that when the children get to secondary age, which is 11, I would buy them a brand new laptop because they will need one for secondary school. I'd bought my oldest nephew one when I got my money, and it only seemed fair. We try and make sure the babies don't think of money as the most important thing in the world. I have set money aside for each of them and plan on ensuring that when they're older they all have houses to live in. Provided my sisters don't have many more, I inherited enough property to give them each a house in the future and have already bought houses for each of my sisters and a flat for my LB, who I still have NC with, but he's still my LB. Anyway, so I got with my DH last year. We met on my master's course and fell head over heels. He is 39. He has 2 children from a previous marriage, 15 and 18, and they live primarily with their mom. DH's family made it clear from the start that I would never be part of their family because the age difference is disgusting and I'm clearly a gold digger, lol. Before we got married, we set an ironclad prenup that stated if we divorced, only assets that are bought whilst married with joint money will be divided. Everything from before marriage and bought by one of us alone would not. That was put in because I have started flipping houses with my sister as baby daddy. DH contributes nothing to these houses, so he feels he isn't entitled to anything from them. He has his own money, albeit not as much as me, which is fine by both of us. We are happy with the arrangement and don't plan on getting divorced anyway. So as the wedding approached, FSD and FSS refused to come, and FDIL called me a gold digging hoe and an ugly effing bit and said her dad was making a huge mistake marrying a tramp like me. Probably should mention, outside DH and my family, no one is aware of my financial situation and I prefer it that way. DH's mother had also made similar comments about me being out for money and calling me names, but did agree to come to the wedding. The wedding arrives, fully paid for by me, and things go off without a hitch. Everyone is drunk and having a good time. MIL had complained about random bits and bobs but mostly kept her mouth shut. Several drunken hours into the reception, MIL was talking to one of my very drunken uncles, and apparently she had been complaining to him that her son must have spent a fortune on this wedding for his gold digger bride. My uncle screwed up and told her about my financial situation. I didn't know any of this until many months later when my uncle confessed after an argument with SD. Anyway, so after the honeymoon things were different. MIL was always super nice and SS and SD started hanging out at the house a lot more, which made me happy because my husband was glad to have them around. Soon my MIL started talking about her roof needing fixing and the woes of being a widow. I asked DH in private if we should offer to pay to fix her roof, but he said no, she could afford it on her own. Meanwhile, SD had started talking about how crap her iPhone was and how she really wanted the newest model. Sometimes DH would get mad at her for being so materialistic, as it wasn't how he raised her to be. Christmas 2019 comes around and DH and I agree that he'll buy for his family and put my name on the card, and I'll do the same for my family. As per the family agreement, I bought each of my nephews and niece something that I knew they'd like and wasn't too extravagant. I went halves with Sister C to buy my eldest nephew a new computer. He has asthma, and by then we'd all got a little paranoid about you know what. This is a good thing we did because 3 months later toilet paper became more precious than gold, and he needed a better laptop for online education. The younger children didn't have the same needs because they were all nursery aged. Anyway, sidetracked, we went round to my DH's mother's for Boxing Day dinner and spent Christmas Day with my family. We brought presents for Boxing Day and everyone opened them together. SD practically snatched the box out of her dad's hand to open it. Then she shrieked in horror. He'd gotten her a brand new iPhone 11. She actually said, and I quote, "WTF, why would you get me this crappy thing? It's almost as bad as my old phone. Turns out she'd wanted the iPhone 11 Pro Max, which was selling for around £1,200 at the time, while the iPhone 11 was around £800. She flipped out. Her dad said that he couldn't afford the Max, and his daughter looked straight at me and said, well, she can. We all know she's loaded. She's just a selfish bit, and a lot of other mean things I don't care to repeat. Then MIL started screaming about how tight I was and how my selfishness had ruined Christmas. DH was livid. He grabbed my hand and dragged me out. He ranted all the way home about how selfish and greedy they all were and wanted to go to NC until they grew out of it. Then obviously the great toilet paper crisis happened and we spent a whole year without seeing them. DH would speak to them on the phone but wouldn't see them, and if they ever tried to talk about me or money, he'd shut them down. I did feel guilty about the whole thing because I could have afforded the extra few hundred for the phone she wanted, but DH said it was not my responsibility to fund his nearly adult children's greed, and that I had enough people to take care of without adding his ingrates to the list. His words. Probably should have mentioned DH's ex-wife is a really nice woman and completely agreed with DH about their children's behavior being out of order. In November 2020 approached DH's EW and contacted DH because SD's laptop had broken and she needed a new one. DH agreed and bought her a £600 laptop and said it was her Christmas present. Of course, she called him up to complain that it was not the one she wanted. Again, she'd wanted some expensive MacBook or something, and the DH should be more considerate of what she wanted. He pointed out that he couldn't afford it, and as she's 18 he has no obligation to buy her anything anymore. If she wanted a £16,000 computer, she should get a job. Again, SD started screaming about how I should pay for it and how selfish I am for not contributing. DH hung up on her. She started texting me a lot of BS about how I'm selfish and ugly and how everyone hates me and that the only reason DH is with me is that I'm loaded. Blah blah. Admittedly, it did really hurt at the time. DH was furious and told his daughter the laptop was the last thing she'd get from him. I tried to talk to him about me just getting her the laptop, but he refused and said that if I give in to that I'll never stop paying for stuff. He also said that it's hard enough on him not to be the breadwinner, knowing that his wife is better off than him, and he sometimes feels a little emasculated that he cannot provide for his children the way I do for my niece and nephews. I felt awful but understood, and after that never brought up paying for anything for them again. I also started asking him if he would like to be involved more with the family and the house flips. He did, and he started spoiling the kids a bit. We've told him not to, but he's a superhero addict, and as my nephews are all going through their Marvel phases, he's been going a little crazy with outfits and toys. He's also started helping with the houses and will be getting a cut of the profits when we flip. Fast forward to the last week. In the UK, things are finally getting back to normalish and people are able to socialize more. On Friday last week, DH's mother turned up while DH was at work. She pretty much barged into my house and without even so much as a hello started ranting at me. She was calling me all the names under the sun and going on and on about me destroying her family with my greed and selfishness. She went on and on about how she knows all about my financial situation and how much I spend a year on those little brats, my niece and nephews, and how wrong it is that I give everyone else money but her and my stepchildren. She continued to rant and rave and I was reaching my limit. I'm not an angry person, but I'm very protective of my niece and nephews. She continued to refer to them as brats and other nasty names. I tried to cut her off and tell her to get out of my house, but she wouldn't. At one point I tried to walk away from her and she grabbed me by the hair and pulled me off the bottom stair. I wasn't hurt. I caught myself on the banister but was startled and did nearly fall. At this point, she was still ranting about how I'm an evil money grabbing bit and how I'm going to hell for what I've done to her family. Then she said the one sentence you never say to an anti-bear. She said only 2 of them are even related to you. You shouldn't care about any of the others. Especially that little gay boy of your cousins, who isn't your responsibility, gets money when my normal grandchildren are left out. I saw absolute red. I got very quiet and told her if she did not get out of my house right this second, she'd need to see a dentist about replacing her front teeth. I know that wasn't wise, but still, I'd had enough. She seemed to realize she was in imminent danger and left. I called DH and told him everything, and he insisted we call the police because she had assaulted me. They came and made a report. I don't know what happened after that, and don't care. The officers said they'd deal with it and later did contact DH, but I was just so tired of it all and didn't want to know. Then on Sunday 1049 came around again. This time DH answered the door, and MIL burst out crying about how I'd tried to get her arrested and how she'd been at the police station for hours. DH simply told her it was him that called the police and if she didn't leave he'd do it again. He slammed the door in her face and went upstairs to lie down. This whole thing is beginning to take a toll on him. After DH went upstairs, I heard a crash, followed by a car alarm. I ran outside and saw that a rock had been thrown through the rear window. Then as I came down the steps of our front porch, another rock flew and hit my pelvis. It was a rather large decorative stone that we had in a circle around a little tree in our front garden. I'm not great with math, so couldn't tell you how big, but big enough that I had to pick it up with 2 hands. Your husband was right OP. If you gave in to his daughter's demands, you'd never stop paying for her stuff. You can't buy your way into being accepted. They didn't like you to begin with and only started being nice to you when they found out you had money, but the mask slipped so quickly. Honestly, you did your husband a favor. They were bad people to begin with, and you coming into his life led to them exposing themselves. Though both your husband and his ex seem like good people, so I do wonder how their daughter turned out the way she did. You never made your mill assault you or throw a rock into your car window, so it is entirely their fault, not yours. I'd say visit her and see if she feels remorse for everything she did. Not some fake apology from someone desperate to stay out of legal trouble, but real remorse from someone who has woken up to all the wrong she did. If you see that, then dropping charges can be the start of a new relationship, but otherwise, press charges and watch her burn in Hades OP. Now, back to the story. DH heard me screaming and came down. His mother had long gone, but we both knew it was her. I thankfully was not injured other than a big bruise and a little bit of discomfort. But this time I insisted on calling the police and she has been arrested. EW has come around to check on me since and begged us not to go through with pressing charges because she's an old lady and is probably just going crazy. But DH isn't having it, and at this point nor am I. I'm not entirely sure what MIL has been telling people, but DH has been bombarded with calls begging, threatening, and attempting to reason with him about dropping charges from a bunch of different family members. Some have even said that whatever happened I had it coming for not spoiling my stepchildren like they deserve. DH has had enough and today changed his and my phone numbers to stop his family from contacting us. My family has been fantastic and very supportive through all this, but it's all just a bit much for me. I can't help but feel like if I just contributed to buying his daughter an iPhone, none of this would have happened. Maybe I should have pushed more to be involved with his family. He's lost his mother and children because of me. I know he's struggling and I don't know what to do. Part of me thinks I should just drop the charges, but the other part wants the old witch to burn in Hades. Anyway, if you made it this far, bravo. But seriously, what do I do? I hate that my husband is caught in the middle of all this. ITA. Now, on to the next story. I, 34, female, found out my pastor and therapist husband has been having numerous affairs. My husband and I have been married for 12 years and he runs an alcohol treatment center that is heavily religious in nature. His father was a pastor, and when he was in school he studied first to also be a pastor and then pivoted towards a master's degree in pastoral counseling with a focus on substance use treatment after he was denied a position at a church he really wanted. One thing leads to another, and in our heavily Southern Baptist area he ends up founding an organization and treatment center that incorporates our faith into sobriety. It has become a mainstay for a lot of local people and people see it as a family. My husband is a great speaker, so he draws in a lot of interest and can easily get people to work for him for free, even though he makes a significant amount every time somebody signs up for a program. In fact, if he spent even 10% of his profit on payroll, these people would be making miles above the national average for their job. I often feel astonished that people aren't resentful that their contributions aren't being compensated for every fraction of what it is worth. But for years I never really questioned my husband or what he did for work because I thought he was doing good, and everybody at the church we go to where he speaks regularly also admires him. However, in recent years, because our sons are now turning 10 and 8, I have been going to community college for paralegal studies and was able to be mentored by friends in the legal profession. I had put off college for so many years because of my relationship and because my husband said I didn't have to worry and that I could stay home and focus on the kids. I found an intellectual curiosity that I never knew I had and definitely want to pursue a career in law. This didn't go over well with my husband and I started to see how dismissive he was of most of my thoughts. I also found out he was lying pretty compulsively to people regarding his childhood and other credentials, a lot of which was to either elicit sympathy or make himself seem more brave or prodigal. For example, he said that his late mom was a habitual cocaine user throughout her life who beat him, an account that everybody in his family says is not true and he also admitted was not true, but that he couldn't think of a good way to spin why he really went into the substance using field. He also constantly mocks every person he's around for work and basically says they will never amount to anything and that they are idiots for either working for free or paying through their noses to get sober. When I married him thinking he was a great guy and that I would stick by him for life, but I find every day more unbearable. At home, he is a totally different person than in public. We had hired a cleaning company and a friend of mine knew the owner. The owner said that he could have made a lot of money off saying that my husband was a client of his, but that he decided it wasn't worth it because of how my husband treated the cleaners who came over to our house. While requests by us have been met with schedule conflicts, we have obviously been banned, and I know that it's because of my husband's dismissive, irate nature. The straw that broke the camel's back was me going to the doctors with symptoms and finding out that I had a bacterial STD after missing periods and having a mysterious mild fever. But I knew that I wasn't the one sleeping around, so when I told my husband about the diagnosis, this, he freaked out and admitted to an affair. I was heartbroken but told him he needed to tell her and her intimate partners about this, and that's when it came out that he was having numerous affairs and he didn't want to tell anyone about it. He got tested and it turns out he was asymptomatic. I found out one of them was a long-term thing, but others were midnight bar flings across the country or escorts. He claimed that his life was stressful and it was just an outlet. He agreed to wear a rubber until I could trust him again and said he wanted to work this out, and that we had to or it would be a public shame for both of us. For a couple of days after this, he was very apologetic, buying me gifts and surprising me with a planned trip to Paris. However, when he said that I should trust his expertise and refuse to see an independent therapist even though there are so many virtual options that would have gotten us a reputable therapist on the other side of the country, he reverted back to being dismissive and ambushed me with an impromptu sit-down about our marriage where he began painting infidelity recovery in a way that it was still only on his terms. I had had enough and we ended up sleeping in different bedrooms. He responded to this by making the concession that I can have the passcode to his phone now and that he won't ever get mad if I ask him to verify where he is going, but he also wants things to go back to normal and for me to act like this never happened. He said we'd be ruined if we divorce and tried to bribe me by saying that I could get a job at his organization to further the career he was fighting me on. But when I still didn't just put a smile on my face and say all is forgiven, he will say that I would have a hard life if I divorced him and that my career would be unrewarding and take me nowhere. What do I do? Our boys feel the tension but both are overawed by their father. I cannot imagine starting over and I feel like he would be very resentful of any divorce. But the duplicity of his and by extension, our life is giving me whiplash. Looks like we've reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and if you did, give this video a like. And don't forget to subscribe or even share the video with people who might like storytelling. And lastly, thanks for watching. I hope to see you all in the next video.